Well, welcome to Mom with a Microphone. I'm so excited because our episode today is going to keep you just on your toes. You're going to be listening and you're going to be brought in and you're going to be like, oh. And it's something that we don't typically talk about, like in the communities that we're involved in or grew up in or even part of now. And might be a little taboo to the world. So I'm really excited to have you. This is my girl, Kayla. I'm really happy that you're here. Welcome to Mom with a Microphone. Take a second and introduce yourself.
So I'm Kayla, 33 years old. I'm a former nurse, but I keep the license, I just don't practice it. But I do have my own business. I get government contracts. So that's just a little bit about what I do.
Okay, so the topic today, and like I said, it's a hard hitter. It's a hard hitter. Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous because your story is important, and I promise it's going to help somebody else. Yeah. So the topic today is promiscuity. Specifically promiscuity in the Christian community. And so, like I said, kind of just now in the intro, like it's something that we don't talk about a lot. I feel like just in general, the Christian community does not talk about sex. We are not raised talking about sex. It's always seen as like a taboo subject. Some people don't even say the word, right? Or use proper words around sex or body parts and things like that. And so we're gonna get kind of raw and real today and just talk about all the things.
Talk about
right. Sex. We're just gonna, I mean, we can talk about sex, we can talk about promiscuity specifically, but I'm gonna start like with just a really basic, like how would you define promiscuity?
Promiscuity to me, just a general sense would be just somebody who, I guess just lack of self-control, like when it comes to just like giving their body away. And I don't think, a lot of times, I don't think that people really want that for themselves. It's just that it's like they're trying to feed this void within themselves. And so typically a lot of people turn to things, whether it's drugs, overspending, overeating. Some people, to them, sex is a drug, or sometimes if people don't know their worth, they tend to give themselves away. So for me, like promiscuity would be just a person who, you know, unfortunately, they're just like, but they have a lot of sex with multiple people that sometimes really is no meaning behind it. It's just more so going after like a feeling like within your flesh.
Yeah. So you said something there that just like, ooh, and it was about self-worth. Do you feel like that was maybe why you were involved in this lifestyle, or like how did that come about to be? Like,
absolutely. Well, for me, of course, you know, a lot of things start in your childhood. And so, you know, when you're at an age where you can't, when you're still trying to understand the world and the things around you and why things are the way that they are, sometimes your mind doesn't really know how to handle all of that. So for me growing up, especially like, you know, I would say like when I was a kid, you know, it was always that stigma of beauty was, you know, light skin, skinny, you know, stuff like that. Me, I was always like the overweight friend. I had a lot of friends, but I was always like the overweight one, the one who didn't really like wear all of the latest clothes or fashion, or, you know, so I kind of felt like left out with certain parts. I didn't feel like I had like that normal, like, I guess like that normal younger childhood when it came to like things like that. And so I didn't know at that time that was something that actually bothered me or affected me until I got older. And when I was about, I would say maybe like middle school, I would say 8th grade, went to 9th grade, somewhere in there. Like, I don't know if you remember Saints in the Palace.
No, like the places?
Well, yeah, Saints in the Palace, like the skating rink.
Yeah.
Well, every Saturday from like 8 to 12, $5 to get in, right? It was basically like nobody skated. Everybody was like in the dance room, right? So that was the thing.
This is middle school?
Oh yeah,
middle school and high school.
We was
okay,
outside.
girl.
We was outside, but no. So we would always go there. They had the big dance room with the DJs and stuff like that. And like I said, nobody was skating. It was basically like a club for kids, basically. Right. And so I remember like guys would always come up to my friends, and I would always be the friend that was like off to the side, like. Nobody was like checking for me. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of felt awkward. And again, I don't know, at that age, I didn't really know how to like channel that emotion. So I would bury it deep down inside. And so again, as I'm getting older, getting like when I was in high school, I had a boyfriend. So when I had graduated, I started getting like more attention from men. And I was like, ooh, I never had that before. So I'm like, let me see what that's like. You know what I mean? And so basically, of course, like having sex before marriage and falling for like what anybody would say, like, oh, well, you're beautiful, and and or just kind of like living off in the moment to the point where it's like, well, I don't care if I feel wanted or desired just for that moment. Then I was basically settling for that.
Yeah.
And then I would tell my friends, like, I don't know why I feel like every time I have sex with like a person, like I feel guilty behind it. And then like, you know, like we're still young, like I'm in like my early 20s. And so they're like, well, I don't know, maybe you just shouldn't do it. And I'm like, that does nothing for a person. Like, and I didn't know that maybe, I don't know if there was some type of spiritual warfare or God trying to let me know like, hey, like this isn't what, you know, you should be doing or whatever. But I will always feel guilty. And I would explain to my friends, I was like, I don't want to be this type of person. Like, I don't even know why I'm doing this to myself. But again, like, you get used to that. And then, of course, like, you know, you go into the clubs now, you know, you smoking and you drinking or whatever, and you just living, you think you living your best life or whatever. So I'm like, well, whatever, I'm single. Like, this is what single people do, you know, in the college era, you know, stuff like that. And so, yeah, it was just a lot of the not really understanding the context of how sex should work.
Yeah.
Of course, like in a marriage and things like that. Not really knowing how to articulate the feelings that I was feeling from a young child. And then, like I said, just when I got to an age where I was like basically grown, just doing whatever it is that I wanted to do, I just kind of took it and ran and just did me, really.
I have a lot of questions. That was a lot. And it's good. It's all good. Like, top 3 questions I can think of right now, right? Like, so were you a believer at the time? Like, is that why you were feeling spiritual warfare?
So so my dad, he played a lot of instruments. And one thing, so he went to a Baptist church. It was a small family Baptist church growing up. And when I would go to his house on the weekends, you know, we would go to church and stuff like that. But, you know, as you get older, kind of stop going. Now, my mom, she worked a lot. So, I mean, I figured she knew God, but like she never really talked about it much. Like, we never really went to church. Like I said, she was a single parent, so she worked a lot. And so I remember at one point when I was in high school, I had like this little, I don't know if it was a teen Bible or something. I don't even know where I got it from. But I would be in class and I would just be reading it. And I don't know why. Every class, walking through the hall, I would just be reading. I was glued to it. And it had lasted for maybe about a couple weeks. And then I don't know why I just kind of like stopped, like kind of get into it. But even like in my 20s, like I did used to go to a church that was down the street and I would go. But I think I was more so going because I thought that maybe if God saw me giving an effort, then maybe I would be okay. But not really understanding that, you know, like this is really like your soul on the line. You know what I mean? Like, so sometimes I guess what I'm trying to say is like, maybe you're just doing it just to be doing it because you feel like it's something nice to do for God, but not really knowing like my soul really needs this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So those friends, like you said, were they the same friends from high school to college?
Some, yeah.
Okay. And then are you still friends with these people?
Yeah, some, yeah. Of course, you know, a lot of people, they move away, you know, how that thing goes or whatever, but some people pass away, you know, but there are a handful that, you know, we are friends. And that was kind of tough for me to navigate when I had first got saved, because it was like, okay, man, like I care about these people. I love these people, but I'm not really doing the same things that they're doing. And it was awkward for me because it's like, they're used to me being a some type of way. And I didn't want to be like that person that was labeled, oh, because you go to church now you this holier than thou, like you don't have time for us. Like I didn't want to come off as me like being better than somebody, me trying to judge them for the things that we all used to do together back then. You know what I'm saying? And so I had to find a way to kind of navigate that. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want to be judgmental. You know what I'm saying? And so I did find a way to navigate that. I was like, listen, like, you know what you're down for, you know, like what you're not. And then people had to understand where I was coming from. But I think that, you know, the people who are your real friends will be there. They will understand you. And that's what happened. Like we have been friends, like I said, since elementary, some since, middle school and high school. And so your real friends will be there. So I just had to learn to just stay true to myself. And at the end of the day, if they can't accept me for what it is, then it's like, oh, well, you know.
What do those relationships look like now?
Well, no, okay. So, well, a lot of them, they have children now. So, of course, more mature, you know what I mean? But now me and my one friend, my friend from high school, she's great. She goes to church and, we talk about God all the time and things like that. So I do feel like our relationship has, I just don't know, any relationship, I guess you're going to go through different,
It evolves, it changes.
Yeah, it's going to evolve in different ways. But now I notice that the language of how we speak with one another is different ever since going to church and like we're both saved and stuff like that. It's like our conversations are always based around God. We talk about God all the time. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, like when you actually like are really getting into it and it's a genuine like relationship that you're trying to build with God, a lot of the connections that you make with people are centered around God. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, so my friends that I have now, they're good, especially coming to our church. I made a lot more, friends that are on the same walk as what I'm doing. And yeah, so I would say that they definitely have matured. They understand and they appreciate where I am with things and they just accept it.
That's awesome. Yeah. What do you think, so during this time when you were in the club and you were drinking, you said you were drinking, using substances and things like that. Did you live alone during this time? Like, did you have roommates?
So me and my best friend, she broke up with her boyfriend and my brother was moving back home. Excuse me. And so my mom, like she didn't want me to move away because like we're like real close. But I was like, no, he could come back. I'm finna go ahead and, my friend was like, well, you can come. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. I would help her with the rent or whatever. And so her and I became roommates. And we were roommates for like maybe 3 years or so, something like that.
Okay, so what I shouldn't assume. Was she also engaging in a similar lifestyle at the time? You mean after she broke up with her boyfriend?
Just in general. No, my friend, she was not promiscuous at all.
Okay. So when you were, she wasn't like, was she out at the clubs with you? And
she wasn't a big club goer. Like every now and then, every now and then, yes, she would come out with us. Like she came out with us pretty often when she became single. But even then, like she was never the kind of person that, felt like she had to be around a big crowd or, she never felt like she had to go to the club. Like she wasn't a club. She's more so like, game night at home with the family, like go bowling, gotcha. Stuff like that. So her and I are totally different. I was extroverted. She's definitely the introverted one.
So during this time, you have a roommate. Mm-hmm. You would go home with other people or bring people home with you. Mm-hmm. Once that was over for the day or the night or whatever, like, how did you feel?
Well, it depends about the person because some people we did kind of talk for some time, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I will say this, the people that I had, sex with and things like that, sometimes I would feel guilty. Sometimes I wouldn't feel anything. Mm. It just really would depend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So leading up to you said you got saved, you started going back to church, you got saved. Mm-hmm. Leading up to, what did that look like? Like what made you, other than like this 2-week spurt of reading your Bible and like just being glued, like what was
that's a
the
long
change?
Story.
What was
I'm trying to make a long time. We got time. Short.
We got time.
So basically, so let's go back to when I was working as a nurse. I worked the evening shift on like this rehab unit, and it was this lady. She was much older than me, 40s, and mind you, I'm in my 20s. And so anyways, she would talk in ways that I never would even think about. Like she would say things like, how was Jesus his real name when the letter J wasn't introduced into the alphabet until year such and such and such? And I'm like, And I was like, I'm like, I never thought about it like that.
I don't
so
think
then
I
I
have
started,
either.
Googling it, like, is that true? And I'm looking at it like, maybe she right, so I guess.
Why was she saying stuff though? Like, did she?
Because, she came off as very friendly, like just always just a normal conversation. Sometimes, how when you talk to people, it feels like you're just really intrigued in the conversation. And like, that's what it would be. And so I didn't think anything of it, and so we were just talking about all kind of things. And so anyways, I saw her a couple times, and after that, I didn't see her anymore. And so then I ended up working with this agency, and I went to another place, and I was on their rehab unit working as a nurse, but this time I was working the night shift. And so lo and behold, the same lady reappears. And so her and I were talking. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in a long time. And like I said, she was real cool. Like nothing, what I'm saying? I just thought that she was just a real cool person. So anyways, we would talk, she would tell me things. And long story short, she was just like, it could be a white man's religion. You shouldn't read that Bible. You should read this Bible because, and when you in church, a lot of times they just, want your money and da da da. So basically, she was planting.
A skeptic. She was a skeptic.
She was planting. Well, she said that she believed in God, but she didn't believe in how they were trying to portray him. So she would like plant seeds, but then it was like, how pastors say if a friend isn't leading you to Christ, but they're taking you away, like that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so again, me at that time, I didn't know anything about that, right? And so anyways, she would just say things and speak in very eloquent ways. I was like, man, this lady is super smart. And so next thing you know, I'm constantly researching. I'm like, man, she right, Long story short, I remember one day we were all sitting down and I was telling her about this dream that I had. And she was like, as I'm telling her my dream, she finished my statement. She was telling me what my dream was, as if like she was in my dream. And though she looked at me,
and it was accurate.
Yes, It was so weird. She looked at me. She had goosebumps on her. She was like, that. She said, oh my gosh, like we're connected. Like that never happens. And da 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 da. And I'm like, and she started crying. I'm like, this is crazy, right? So listen, I know this sounds weird, y'all. This is some real stuff that happened. So anyways, fast forward another day. She asked me, she was like, have you ever thought about casting spells? I said, listen. Now, at this time, mind you, at this time, I had walked away from the church because I was preaching the same thing that she was saying. And she told me, she was like, a lot of my family.
You were preaching the same thing she was saying as a result of what you were hearing and learning from her. I was basically condemning people
for going to church.
But based off of what you were getting from her.
Right. I had even looked into this, like a certain type of Bible that she had, but I never really read it.
What was it?
Girl, I can't even remember. This was like some years ago. I can't remember the name of the Bible.
Interesting.
But I would just like, I was on a Dr. Umar Johnson thing. I was like on the Hebrew Israelite. Like I was, and then I would be like thanking ancestors and stuff like that. Girl, that stuff sounds so weird to me now. I can't even believe I did it. But like
you were
based
searching.
Based on what I was getting from her, I was like, well, maybe I had this whole religion thing wrong. You know what I mean? And so like I said, she asked me, she was like, have you thought about casting spells? I said, listen, I ain't going to church or whatever. I was like, but I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing that. And so, like I said, and I would actually be walking down the halls and I would feel like as if somebody was like behind me. Like I started to get paranoid, like weird stuff.
After she asked this question?
Even days after. Yeah. And so after that, I ended up leaving that job and I went to another job and I worked on their rehab floor. And so again, I'm working the night shift. And at this time, I didn't know what was going on with me. I just remembered that one day when I was at home, I felt this presence literally into my body and it was depression. I've never dealt with it like that. I didn't know what it was, but I felt this heavy downing spirit literally coming. That's why nobody can tell me that depression is not a spirit, because I know for a fact that it most definitely is. Because I was fine one minute, then the next minute it was just like
just heavy.
Yeah. And I was like, man, like something's wrong. And then, like I said, I was working a night shift one night, and in the morning times when I would get off work, I would try to go home. I never had an issue with going to sleep. I would literally be in my bed shaking. And I'm like, why am I shaking? I'm like, Kayla, like, you're fine. Like, nothing's going on.
Do you think that was fear? Like, what was it?
I don't know.
Like, if you had to put a human feel, like,
if it was a feeling, I can't even put it into words. It's like I felt like I was anxious. It was anxiety. That's what it was. Because, anxiety and depression, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And it gets worse at night for a lot of people. So I don't know if that was why, I was going through all of that. But I couldn't get rest. Literally, I couldn't even go to sleep. And so I remember one day I was at work. I was by myself. And I literally went into the bedroom. I broke down in tears. I was like, God, listen, whatever it is that I did, I am sorry. Literally, God was making me eat my words. He's like, listen, okay, if you want to go out there and do whatever it is that you want to do, if you want to choose the world over me and you want to start condemning people around you who's going to church or whatever, then I'm going to go ahead and let you be uncovered for a second so you can really see what was out there. And so when I did that, I was boohoo crying. And it had, honestly, but even before that, it had got so bad to the point where I thought that I was going to check myself into a mental hospital at DePaul. It was at DePaul hospital. It was epic because I didn't know what was going wrong with. I just wanted rest. I was like, why am I not normal? Like, that's what and I was like, I don't want people to think that I'm crazy or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, I don't know. It was just like, I don't know. That was a hard, dark, crazy time for me. But anyways, when I had.
How long was that? Like, for how long?
Thank God I'm a talker. So I had told my mom, like some of my family around me, and they were trying to give me help. And so maybe like, I probably dealt with that for like maybe 6-7 months.
So during that time, those friends, where were they in the mix of all this?
My best friend, with her and I were still living together. My other friends didn't know. I told my best friend, like, I feel like everybody don't need to know everything.
Right.
Even if they are a friend that you've been knowing for years. But I told my best friend and like some people in my family that I was like, of course, really close to. And so my friend, she would like encourage me. It was one time that I had stopped living. Well, my stuff was still there, but I felt like I didn't want to be alone. So I would leave there and I would stay at my mom's house for like a month or two. It got bad to the point that I didn't even go to work for 30 days. Thank God the lady at my job, I told her I didn't tell her everything in detail, but I kind of gave her a brief, synopsis of what was going on. And she was just like, take your time whenever, you still have your job or whatever. And so I went through therapy. And then after I had truly repented, like if you've never been at the mercy or at the feet of God, like that was a true moment for me where I literally had repented. And after that, it didn't take long for things to turn around. Mind you, they had put me on antidepressants. I was taking Prozac. And so I prayed to God one day. I was like, God, I don't want to be on this medication. With antidepressants, you just can't stop them cold turkey. You have to kind of wean yourself off because you can have a rebound, and you have a whole nother episode. But I prayed about it, stopped it, never had any issues. And then I started going back to church. I would do things like stuff I never did. Like I would go to like, not a food, well, almost kind of like a food pantry, but like homeless shelters. And I would kind of like help out. I don't know, because in my mind I was like, if I can help somebody else with their issue, then I don't have to really focus on mine. You know what I mean? So I would do that. Like I said, I started going back to church. And my life really did, turn around. But see, it was allowing me to see that, you allow a lot of things to have access to you. Whether it was that lady, like that's what I said, like I've never known what the enemy looked like, but the enemy in the flesh is a real thing. So now if somebody was to ever come to me, I can discern like that, like, oh no, I've been there. I would never, I would never do that. I'm never ever get into anything like that. If I hear people talking against God, I'm sorry, but I have to move around, because I understand what that is like. And so, that was just a really deep, like a deep, dark time. Like, thank God we came out of that.
So during that time, were you still clubbing? Like, were you still going out? What did that look like?
No, at that time, I did not want to be bothered with that because I'm trying to get myself together. I was not even in the mood to even even think about something like that. I would do things like with my family, or if my friends had something at their house, like stuff like that. But not really going to the clubs, like all of that. I started to feel real convicted about that, guilty about it, and so I didn't have a desire for that. I didn't have a desire for wanted to have sex with just people from my past that I was familiar with, or or even like for a guy that just comes along and say, hey, you know, like, let's go out, have fun and kick it or something like that. Like, I just didn't have a desire because I knew that I wanted more and I knew that I deserved more. And so all those things, those old ways slowly started to kind of die off of me.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just going to go back again. Do you feel like that spirit that you were feeling, like, of depression, do you think that came from, because I thoroughly believe that spirits are real, and I also think that they can be passed. And so do you feel like that was something that came from that woman? Do you feel like it was maybe something as a result of, like, maybe one of your partners? Like,
it could have honestly been a mixture of both, but I would tell you, well, because I felt guilty, but I've never felt depression like that, like to the point where I felt something come into me that day. And so when I actually talked about it, somebody was like, she probably was if she talked about spells and stuff like that, you don't know what that lady was into.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was funny enough that after that, it's like as if the lady fell off the face of the earth.
never saw her again?
Never saw her again.
That's crazy.
And that's crazy because even if a guy in particular, say if they try to talk to me or whatever, they'll talk to me once or twice. Like I'll see them, like, especially like in my office. It's something in my office where like men will try to say certain things like here and there, but I don't really pay them no attention. But it's like I'll see them once or twice, and after that, never see them again. They just people. And I've noticed that like I said, if it's people that aren't good for me or that aren't supposed to be around me, I never see them again.
So this is really good. All this is just so good. But I want to know, like, what boundaries did you set in place to make sure? I mean, you talked about this, the leading up to the change, what changed and how shortly after, it really wasn't long before things started truly turning around for you. But what boundaries did you set in place that you maybe still have in place to help keep you from jumping back into old lifestyles and running back to promiscuity and things like that?
Well, I know God told me, he told me, like, again, not too long ago, he was like, I need you to love yourself. This was last year. He's like, you know, mind you, I haven't been having sex, you know,
right.
It's been a couple years, you know, but I'm just saying, but, you know, God was like, you know, I need you to love yourself. And then he also told me two things last year. He was like, the truth will set you free. And then I need you to love yourself. And I'm like, okay. But this year I feel like I'm really walking into what he was saying. Like I'm understanding it more. And so basically I just started having like these revelations. Like, you know how they say the Holy Spirit will, you know, cause you to remember certain scriptures, or like certain things will just come to your mind, like an idea or something like that. That was happening to me. And, you know, when I was thinking about it, I was like, you know what? I said, well, what is love? And I looked up the definition of love in the Bible, right? The biblical definition of love. Of course, being patient and kind, things like that. I'm like, okay, so are you being kind to yourself? And when I thought about that, I was like, because that same girl that used to mentally berate herself, saying like she wasn't good enough, or, you know, she was overweight, or nobody's ever going to want you, you know, think like it's like you've come into an agreement with this lie, and you've been carrying it your entire life. And so now that becomes a false identity for you.
Dang.
And it's like, so it's like, it's hard for you to actually receive the truth when you've been operating like that for so long.
Yep.
And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be kind to myself. Like I'm gonna start treating my body truly as a temple of God. Like this is a loner. Like, you know what I mean? This is not my forever dwelling place. You know what I mean? And so I was like, God, forgive me for defiling your temple. I was like, you know, so last year, and this is no flex, but I fasted a lot. Like he was helping me to fast. Like I fasted for maybe a good 7-8 months last year. I did a lot of water fasting. I would do 3-day water fast. And then on the 4th day, I would eat. And I did that. So I lost like 100 pounds in under like 3 months. Like it was coming off quick. Yeah. And I stopped eating meat. Like that's why people like, how did you get into the whole vegan thing? Because I just stopped eating, you know. So anyways, long story short, I was like, okay, I want to start treating my body better. Even though it's still, of course, a journey. But I was like, okay, I need to look at it like, you know, I don't want to be unhealthy, you know, especially when you get older and things like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start being kinder by eating more fruits and vegetables so my body doesn't have to overwork itself to break down all these other carbs and sugars and things like that. And so I was like, okay, well, what are other like forms of love? It's like not allowing people to enter your temple. You know what I mean? If a person doesn't care about you, why would God send that to you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's like, and also like, you know, knowing your authority. Like, you don't, like Pat say, like, you don't have to sit and take any of this stuff. You know what I mean? So like having a certain type of like confidence and boldness and standing on, you know, what God says that you are and how he looks at you. It has been a journey. Like I said, if you're used to operating a certain type of way your entire life, it's like
Yep.
God is, you know, introducing you to who you are. And I prayed that. And I was like, God, listen, if there's, you know, any old, you know, behaviors or any old false, you know, truths or lies, you know, that I've accepted as truths for myself, help me to detach from that. Give me the eyes to see it and the ears to hear it, because, you know, I want to know like who I truly am. And
That's good.
once he started uncovering a lot of things of who I really am, I was like, dang, so I was never really this person the whole time. Like I was just accepting this for myself.
Dang.
So then it's just kind of like you start having a lot of revelations of what the truth really is. And so that's, like I said last year when he was like, the truth will set you free. You really are free. So once you start to believe and accept what he says about you, then you're no longer bound to the lie of what Satan tries to put in your mind.
That's so good. That is
Yeah.
so, and that's something honestly like the church needs to hear. Like people, even not the church, just women in general, we need to hear that, because a lot of times it's so easy to get wrapped up in false identities, right? Like your job, your career, if you become a mom, if you don't, like your singleness, your relationship. It's so easy to get wrapped up in those things and forget who you are. And it's like, that's something, you know, especially as a mom, like that's something I've battled. And I think a lot of other moms would agree. Like that's just a very real, like it's a reality. It's a reality, right? Like, so finding your identity, keeping your identity, and knowing your truth, knowing the truth of who you are, but that who you are is not found in you solely as a person, but in the person who made you, and figuring out what that's supposed to look like. Our producer actually had an awesome question for you. So I'm going to go ahead.
I was going to say something else.
Go ahead.
I can't really say. Well, I wanted to say this before I even stopped talking, but I had forgot. So I just remembered as you were talking on how God had to encounter me in order for me to receive the truth. So really short, I won't take too long, but
we have time.
So this was like months ago. I was in my room, right, and I have an iPad. I'm like, you know how sometimes you feel like, man, I feel like there's a disconnect, you know, maybe I need to go on a fast or something, you know. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna fast. And it was like, you know, I was writing down like all the things that I wanted to fast. I'm gonna do a 7-day fast or whatever. Now, mind you, have you ever heard of Stephanie Ike Okofer? She's with the Potter's House with Sarah Jakes Roberts and her husband, Torah. Well, anyway, she was gonna have to sing. But anyways, I was watching this sermon that she was giving, and it was basically about like, you know, fasting, spiritual warfare. And she was like, you know how like some people, like when you go on a fast, people say, oh, I want to fast from social media, or, you know, eating a certain type of food or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. And if that's your advice, then of course there's nothing wrong with that. But she was like, how about actually fasting from the things that are actually oppressing you? Like, you know, shame, your guilt or whatever, you know,
that's good.
Fasting from that, because that's really what you're really battling, you know.
Dang.
And so when I was like, man, so I'm like, okay, I'm put down shame. I'm like a legalistic mindset, because I'm like, you know, I used to feel like, you know, a lot of times I had to do things to earn people's love. And even like with God, I feel like, you know, I would have to, you know, follow like a list of rules so that he would see that I'm trying to be good, and then he would honor me as his daughter.
Accept that.
And accept it. Right. And so I was like, but I know that that's not how he operates. Right. In my human mind, but when I was thinking that, how I used to think, I would think that about him, but that's not who he is. And so I was like, help me to break free from that. You know, like I said, guilt, shame, regret, all these other type of things. And literally, while I'm writing this stuff, it's like a thought pops in my head, but it's as if I can see it. And so I can like literally like imagine if this room was dark, right? But it was dimly lit. Now in this room, I can see this big, huge throne chair sitting against the wall, right? And everything that I had wrote down, well, what Satan was sitting on the throne chair though. A big Satan was sitting on a throne chair, but everything that I had wrote down on my iPad, guilt, shame, or whatever, it was over his head, but he was sitting like this, as if he was exalting these things.
Yep.
And I can imagine myself with like this cloak wrapped around my shoulders. But see, I was sitting on my knees bowing down to it.
Ooh.
When I pictured that, God was telling me that has been your God, because I would never send anything like that to you. I'm not going to send shame and guilt and all the things that I've died for. I am not going to send that to you. And the very thing that you obey is what you serve. So if you're walking around here with bad days more than you're having good days, if you're walking around constantly, you know, thinking that you're this bad person because of whatever was done, you know, the things that you've done in the past, that's not something that comes from me. And then I could imagine in the same breath, God standing behind me like, why? It is so much easier over on this side of it. You know what I'm saying? And so when I thought about it like that, I'm just like, that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, then God, then who am I then? Because I'm like, here I am. It's like, okay, it's as if like I'm saying, you know what, Satan, you're right. Everything that I have been through in the past, I'm going to agree with you that I should bear shame and guilt on my shoulders for the rest of my life. I'm going to allow you to oppress me, and I'm going to serve it. And then when I thought about it, like, it sounds absolutely ridiculous. But when I thought about it like that, I'm just like, I've been agreeing with a lie. And it has been so hard for me, to the point that it's hard for me to even see or accept and sometimes even believe the truth. But once I had to see it like that, it was just like, sis, you need to unplug from the matrix, because the things that you have been believing is true is not. Like, it's really simple. It's really not, you know. And like I said, God was setting me free at that very moment. It's not something that took like years. It's like literally like once I had started writing all that stuff down, what I wanted to get rid of, it's like instantly.
That's it.
He started to show,
That's crazy. Yep. So and actually I think this ties in really well. Our producer had a really great question. I want to make sure that we hit on it. So shout out to our producer, Jimmy Miller.
Woo, woo, woo.
So I want to, okay. So the question was, what do you feel like you learned in your season of promiscuity? And then what did you learn like on the other side of that? Am I saying it right? Am I saying the question right? Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you learn? What were you learning, I guess, during that season? And then what did you learn afterwards as a result of going through that season?
What I learned was, trying to think of how to put this. I guess what I learned was, even though you may do things that you don't understand, don't ever agree with the lie that you're not valuable, that you're worthless, and that you don't have to settle for a quick 10, 15 minutes with somebody just so that you feel desired in that moment. You know what I mean? Because really what it is, you have to get to the deep root of what's causing you to do that act in the first place. And so I learned that, now hindsight, of course, you know, I learned that I am valuable. I have worth. That, listen, my father is a king, so I already know what I am. If he's a king, I already know who I am. But also, like I said, like, not settling, and also not looking for things of this world, flawed other, human beings in this world to fill a God-sized void within you. We all have a God-sized void within us that only God can fill, for that very reason. So, like I tell myself, like, we're not going to idolize this thing. Like, that is no longer your God. Promiscuity isn't your God. It doesn't define who you are. You know what I mean? Like, that isn't anything that's of you. You know what I'm saying? That's just a symptom of something else that really is a deep rooted issue that God really wants to work out with you, but you have to allow him to come in to do that type of surgery on your heart. You know what I mean? And so I just learned to, and you would think that, like, man, I'm never going to get out this cycle. I'm never going to be able to, just get it right. I'm never going to be able to stop laying on my back with these eyes. But it's just like I don't know. And it could be, like I said, the older you get, you start to mature, and, things, like I said, they're going to fall off. Sometimes, I can't say that for everybody, but I feel like a lot of things get old and you're going to want something more. So if you're in your 20, your teenager, 20 years old or whatever, you think it's a lot of fun, you out partying, having sex with this person, that person, it's going to get old, and you're still going to feel empty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just had to accept the fact that God is enough.
Yeah.
God, you're more than enough. Once you start to accept that and understand it, then you'll start to see the freedom in that.
That's really good. That's really good. And I know someone needed to hear that, man. I needed to hear that. So we talked the other night a little bit about just like how the church in the past has generally approached sex and promiscuity. Did you have any experience in that, like growing up? Like what did the church have to say?
They would just say, okay, don't do it. Don't have sex until you're married and that's it. But it did nothing for a person who wanted to have sex. You know what I'm saying? I still had the feelings of anybody else, you feel a little frisky and you're like, okay, I'm going to go do something about that. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's just like, it's so, but then and another thing that I also realized was, and it used to frustrate me, it will always be somebody who's married telling a single person
not to go
don't have sex. Easy enough for you to say that because you're married.
Right.
And you're telling me I have the same desire as you. Whilst you can go to your husband or you can go to your wife and you can do whatever, but I have to sit here and grit and bear it. That did absolutely nothing for me. And that would make me to me, I would basically be like, well, enough. Well, of course you can talk about it. You know what I mean? Because we don't share the same struggle. So I felt like we weren't really on the same page. While, yes, what they were giving me was true. You know what I mean? The information they were trying to give me was true. The
why and the how was not realistic.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't even there. Yeah.
Right. I'm like, the society that we're in, and like, especially if you're a person you've already, had sex before, show me how to fight this desire as far as lust. Like, break it down a little bit further to me on what it really is versus just saying, oh, don't do it.
So what advice do you have for, and I'm going to ask you for more advice later, just for the listeners in general, but specifically for people who are in the church who feel like they are struggling, or maybe this is a losing battle, or maybe it's something that, they're ashamed to talk about. Like what can you give them? Like encouragement, advice, what would you say to that? And what would address the people? And then I want you to address the church specifically, because again, it's something that we don't talk about. Like, we don't talk about it.
I'm like, I feel you, sis. Well, I feel you, but okay, say that again. So what would I say?
So it's a two-part question.
Okay.
So like, what advice do you have just for women in general who might feel this way, or like they feel like they're struggling, they're battling, and then the same thing for the believers, but what would you say to the church specifically on this subject? Like,
I would say, I don't know, just be more realistic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, of course, we have scripture, which is, of course, sound doctrine, but let it be relatable. You know what I mean? Like, and don't make a person feel bad if they do struggle with it. Like, like I said, we all have our vices. Nobody on this earth is perfect. While people may try to act like it, they are not. And I would just say, I wish, honestly, that we had, more groups of, I would say, especially single people, because that's where I'm coming from. More groups of like people, women and men, like, who are single when we struggle with these type of things, that we can actually have people who are an accountability partner. Because for me, I felt like I couldn't really tell people, because either a lot of my friends were married already, or I just, sometimes you feel like I can't tell this person everything because I don't feel like they'll understand where I'm really coming from. So it's like something that you,
or maybe you'll be judged.
That too. And it's like, I just have to keep it on the inside. But I feel like, if like, I would say if churches had more groups, like where it was a safe space to actually talk about sex, or if you're feeling horny, or if you're feeling like, hey, I'm finna pull out the black book because I'm about to relapse, like it's almost like we need an AA program for horny singles. That's what I'm saying. But no, I don't know, it's just having an accountability partner, somebody that you, like I said, you feel safe to actually have those type of conversations with, and allowing you to be around people who won't judge you, because they, of course, share the same struggles. And if you have those feelings, just know that it's okay. Like, you shouldn't feel guilty about it, because like I said, like, it's normal. We all I'm gonna say, some of us, some of us, we really do all like sex. Like, you know what I mean? So it's not like it's this bad thing. Like they try to make you feel like, well, some people may try to make you feel like, oh, well,
it's not
you're nasty or it's dirty,
or,
right?
yeah.
Because like you have these feelings, like the feelings are there for a reason.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and a lot of times it's also it's biological. Because for me, if it's not like as if I can walk outside and if I see a guy who's attractive, I'm not looking at him like, oh, well, like, what would I do with him? That wasn't always the case for me. Mine, like ladies, like when it's that time of the month and you're ovulating, sometimes you can't help that feeling comes up. And that's what it would be for me a lot of times too. So it's not always the woman who's out lustfully looking at a man. A lot of things are biological. So I would just say don't feel bad, but definitely have somebody that you can go to who can be a good accountability partner.
Can you address just women in general? Because maybe there are women who aren't believers and they're struggling and they don't want to feel like their self-worth or their identity is wrapped in sex or in, you know, these short-term or long-term relationships with just random people. Like what would you say to them?
I would say pray to God that, you know, that he can keep you content and can sustain you until the man that he has for you comes along. And I know that it's easier said than done, but ask him to, you know, give you eyes to see and ears to truly hear his voice so that you can discern when a person truly is for you and when they are not. And if you're ever, you know, when you're struggling, you know, with sex, you know, and you want to, you know, you want to fulfill that. Basically, it's like, you know, just realize like that's the time you really need to like get into your word and understand what it is that God says that you can do through him. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Ask him for the strength while you are single to, you know, walk this purity thing out, because it's not easy. Like you are going to need his help because you cannot do it by yourself at all. You know what I mean? And so I would just tell people, lean on God and what he says and agree with his word. Like Pastor was just saying at the Wednesday service, I don't know if you were there, but he was like, you know, you have to first agree with God and claim his promises. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times you would think like this, like, well, let me say this about myself. I would think like, man, I'm never going to get out this cycle of promiscuity or masturbation or whatever, because I've done this so many times. I try to stop and then I go back to doing it. I stop and I go back to doing it, you know, and that's because you've already come into the agreement with the lie that I can never get out of this cycle, or God, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you're not even agreeing with what God said that you can do through him. So first you have to agree with the word that he already spoke over you and just have to really hold on tight to that. And eventually it will get better, because you'll start to, when you start, you know, operating in the spirit more so than your flesh, you'll start to see that, man, like I really can do it. It's almost like an empowering type of feeling. You know what I mean? Yeah. So hopefully I said that right.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, I used to be a kind of girl. I would Google so many type of thing. I would be on YouTube looking. And I know that what I'm saying, it may not. Sometimes, depending on who's receiving it, it's like, okay, whatever. Like, it still does nothing for what I'm feeling. Like, you know, I would feel like that a lot of times. Sometimes I'll be on Google like, well, if I do this thing, is this a sin? Okay. You know, because I'm trying to find a way to like kind of validate what it is that I really wanted to do anyways. But just know that, like, you know, you're not alone. A lot of people around the world are going through the same thing as you. So you just really have to hold on to what God says that you can do through him, and just keep going, sis. It's not easy, but keep going.
This really has been phenomenal. Like, thank you again for coming on Mom with a Microphone. Like, so to wrap everything up, you said a lot of really great stuff. But if you had just one piece of advice for all women, moms, not moms, just women in general, on dealing with, I feel like it's turned more into a conversation. Like, you shift from promiscuity, and it's like this feeling of like promiscuity kind of owning you, to figuring out your self-worth and your identity, to where you know what I'm saying? Like, where that no longer is a part of it. So what one thing or advice or encouragement do you have just for women in general on self-worth and finding out who they are to help avoid, you know,
going down that road of promiscuity,
or even to get out of that road if you're on it?
Oh, well, just know that you are worth it. That, I mean, you're more than what's between your legs. You're more than just laying on your back for, like I said, 5, 10, 15 minutes with a guy who's going to be here today and then gone tomorrow. You're so much more than that. And pray to God that, you know, he will reveal the roots of what it is that's causing you to do those types of things, and pray that he gives you the eyes to see yourself as how he sees you. Not on what the world is saying that we should be out here doing, twerking or whatever, you know what I mean? But allow God to truly, like, you know, penetrate and enter your heart. Invite him into that space. Pray for him to reveal his fullness. And I was actually, I don't know if I told you yesterday, but I was watching this, it wasn't a sermon, but it was these two ladies, very smart, articulate ladies, but they were basically saying that, you know, a lot of people try to put God in this box where his fullness is only limited to whether I get married, whether I have kids, or it's revolved around sex. God, his fullness is so much bigger than that. His, like, don't even limit, like, we try to put these, like, restraints on him. Like, he created all of this. Like, there's so much beauty and splendor in the world. There's so many opportunities that are awaiting you. But if you're focused on one thing, then you will miss it, you know? So I would just say, just pray that God shows you who you are, who he created you to be. What purpose does he have for you in your life? So, you know, that way you're not out here just trying to do things in your own strength to fill any type of voids that only God can fill. Like, pray that God reveals his fullness, his wholeness, and that you are complete and you will never be lacking anything.
Yeah. Girl, you just in here preaching, man. Like, I'm here for it. That was phenomenal.
I'm excited. I was
Thank
happy to be
you.
here.
Thank you again. Like, I just thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.